Inside Unreal, a weekly show where we learn, explore, and celebrate everything Unreal. I am your host, Tina, and today with me I have two wonderful guests that most of you are probably already very familiar with, but for those who may not be familiar with you, Aaron and Sam. Would you like to introduce yourselves, Aaron? Let's start with you.
Sure. I'm Aaron Langmead, principal tech artist at Epic Games. Ran the lovely Project Titan for the last year of my life. And yeah, it's been lots of fun.
And I'm Sam. I'm Sam Bass. I am a tech designer at Epic Games, and I have been helping Aaron run Project Titan for the last year. And it has been one of the most interesting experiences of my career, I think. It's been really fun.
Yeah, it was an incredibly unique project and jam just watching even from the outside. So I really am excited to dig in and hear more about your thoughts on just everything about it, how it all went, how it is now, because it is officially launched as of yesterday. In case anyone wasn't aware, Project Titan is currently available. You can go download it on Fab right now. We have the link available in the description as well as we'll post it in the chat here in a second as well. So go check it out because it's out there. It's done, it's ready. But would either of you like to talk a little bit about it in case anyone watching isn't familiar with what Project Titan is?
Yeah, I can give a just a very quick overview of what the hell we're talking about. Um, so basically, Project Titan is an open world sample game. So basically, you can go in and you can see this really big open world. It's about 64 square kilometers, an 8 by 8 kilometer map, filled with kind of like tons of different assets with different regions and stuff. And the big spin that we did on it, because normally when we do like a sample game or kind of like something that Epic will release as like a project you can open in the engine, we kind of we squirrel away on it for months and months and months, and then show this pristine, kind of incredible, cool looking tech demo. But we wanted to do it a bit differently, where we basically just brought everyone in to that experience. So we hosted a basically a giant collaborative art jam, using ArtStation as the kind of the main platform to get everyone in. We set up a Perforce server on AWS, who both of who kind of sponsored the project, or partnered with us on the project, I should say. And then we basically just let anyone who wanted to build something, just join the server and just go nuts and kind of create a load of stuff. And then we, Sam and I and Sebastian, who's the other developer on this project, basically spent the next 3 months managing that situation, which was a lot of fun. It was really a lot of fun, but it was it was also a lot of work. So we've built it in a very odd way. It's not a sample, not technically built by Epic. It's been built by the community. We're just kind of custodians of it at this point, and we're trying to get it to a point where it's it's in a very it's in a good state, so people can play it. It's well optimized and it runs well and stuff like that. And that's going to be a journey that we're going to be carrying on for kind of well into next year, as well as we add more and more stuff to it.
Yeah, and it is awesome. There's so many cool little uh different environments, different situation spots because the project was split between different biomes, right? And then folks
Mhm.
kind of tackled each biome in their own groups, own teams, sort of. And of course, they could work on multiple, but it did seem like they kind of, for the most part, found their own biome and then just went wild and managed to make this giant world that all kind of worked together.
It was
What was that like watching that whole thing happen?
it was amazing watching community just kind of happen. I say just kind of happen, like you didn't rebuild our Discord server for us. But yeah, it was amazing watching groups go, oh, I'm interested in working this, you're interested in working this, I'm a modeler, I'm a material artist, I do concept work, whatever, and then forming into groups and really putting stuff together so you get these amazing sort of cohesive environments. One of the worries with something like Titan is that it's going to end up this kind of hodgepodge of tons of different stuff that doesn't go together. But because people were communicating and working together, you get these really nice cohesive spaces. It's and like we sort of set up the biomes, but the credit for building them out like that really does go to the people who did the work. The community did amazing stuff.
Yeah, we had
Yeah.
no idea how people were going to organize. Like we kind of just there's very little organization, which is kind of me in a nutshell. Basically, it's kind of like I'm just going to let chaos happen, and then we'll, something's going to happen. So we just threw them into a Discord server, which at the time had like 4 pages, I think it was, something like that. And then we got Tina involved, who's much better at this kind of community stuff than we are by a very, very long way. And she just like she walked into the room and was just like, "Oh dear, this is not good," and literally reformatted the entire thing. But the so it was much better by that point. But yeah, all of the artists who joined, they completely self-organized. Like they decided they were going to work by region, so we kind of like we adjusted the Discord page so that they could work like that. They had, kind of discipline groups as well that kind of formed and stuff like that. It was incredible to see this, this whole project happen. Like it was awe-inspiring, really was.
It was a really fun experience to watch. Um, Especially even from my perspective as a community manager. Yes, just watching a community literally build itself from the ground up was insane. But you all laid the groundwork for it, so I have to make sure we give kudos to you because you made the
But
original world that they got to go in and populate.
yeah, I
Did
do need
build
to
that.
stress the like the looseness of that groundwork.
It was not entirely solid ground.
Like, yeah, there was ground,
We did
um
make a lot of ground. There was
there was,
Literal
64
ground,
kilometers
yes.
of
yeah,
it.
yeah, we made ground, and then we were like, that'll probably do, and then we just ran from there. But I think it was a really good way of doing it because while it certainly had its downsides, it gave people a lot of freedom to kind of build the way that they wanted. Like kind of like the main thing that we just did was try to keep stuff cohesive. So that it all needed to feel like it felt within the same world. So while I didn't really have a vision for how any of the areas needed to look or should look, as long as it was all cohesive, that was kind of the main thing. So just making sure that everyone was kind of building stuff that felt like it all fit within the same world was kind of the main goal. And then also making sure that that content was being built in the right way, or kind of being built to a good standard was kind of like the secondary goal there.
Yeah.
We provided a lot of sort of guidance, I guess. I think that would be a good thing to lean into, was that, like we didn't want to tell people what to build. We wanted to help them build it in the best possible way. So we created a lot of training material. If you're
Which we
interested, it's
have.
available on the Epic developer community.
Yeah, so if we switch over to my screen, I've got a few of it up I can scroll through. But basically, throughout the entire jam, we were kind of posting videos, which seemed like a really effective way of kind of just teaching people how to do stuff. So basically, all of those videos are up. At the time, it was about 56 videos. I think we've whittled them down to about 36 or something like that. And they range from kind of like very, very Titan specific stuff. So like how our parent material works and how it's all structured, to stuff that's kind of more generic and more best building practice. So kind of like ways of managing blockout assets and, kind of like designing PCGs with kind of cliffs in mind and creating collision and stuff. So like these are all like quite short form content. They're about, most of them are about like 5 to 10 minutes long. They kind of cover a very specific topic. And we kind of posted those throughout. So all of that content's available. We've actually done just a massive dump of content because we've got all of these videos up and the sample project, which is about 80 gig when you download it, which is quite a lot. A fair amount of that is actually the like pre-cooked content. So technically, the actual content folder is about 50 gig. And then obviously when you package it up, it's significantly smaller. So when we did like Android testing, for example, the Android version of Titan is about 15 gig altogether. But we had that. And we also had a massive art blast where all of the artists who participated were invited to kind of contribute their work to this final project. So if you go on ArtStation now, there's a featured section called the Art of Project Titan. You can read about the art blast on there, and we've got just a bunch of kind of lovely rendered work from all of the artists that contributed to it. So we're trying to do as much as possible to celebrate kind of the artists who actually did kind of all of the all of the work on this stuff ultimately.
Yeah, it's I spent a little bit of time yesterday just going through the art blast myself. There's so much incredible content to dig through in there, so I do highly recommend that those of you who haven't had a chance to check it out yet do so, because it's a lot of fun and there's a lot to look at there. Um, it's really
Yeah.
good. It's awesome.
And all of it is completely free for everyone to use now in their own Unreal project. So it's something that we were super clear about from the start, because I did not want anyone going into this experience not realizing that the work that they were building was going to be released for free. But that's exactly what we've done. So the whole sample is available for download. So all 50 gig of content is available for you to download and go through and explore and learn from. But it's also under the same standard marketplace license as all of our other content is as well. So for things like Lyra and Crop Out and Stackobot and City Sample, like all of that content is content for you to use in your own projects and your own games. So you can take this as a good starting point. And I know that the original dev team that kind of built this, the Titan, kind of game jammers are keen to kind of get this version of the cleaned up version of the project so that they can start building their own thing. But it's it's up for grabs now, so anyone can use it. And we've got some incredible stuff in here. So not just the environment, but also the characters as well. Like we've got we're going to do another sizzle reel at some point soon to kind of showcase all the character work that's done in here as well, because it's been quite environment focused, obviously, for the first one, because it is an open world example. But we've got all of these characters in here, and loads of them are kind of really amazing characters. Like this one. This one came up really early on in the project. I think we started to see this one come up soon. It was really cool to see. So lots of customization of both the base character, but also some kind of unique characters on top of that as well.
And you also get like the user interface system and the tools we use to build the world and the player character, which is customizable and uses Mover, the new movement system that came out with it came with 5.4, but it's kind of in fruition in 5.5. So all of that stuff, if you want to use it as an example, or you want to take it wholesale and use it in your thing, please do.
Yep.
If it makes your life easier, go for it.
We've even got the landscape designer as well in there. So in Ignored Maps, there's a level called Landscape Design, which is actually this level's landscape that we built that has all 600 odd layers on it that you can use, which is crazy. But then also in the plugins folder and Landscape Designer, we've got all of the base textures that we use to build the landscape. So you get access to all of the height stamps that we used, including all of the different mask layers that we generated for them as well when they load.
And there's a photo mode. Forget the photo mode. If you want a photo mode, we made one. You can use it. Every game should have a photo mode. I firmly believe
agree. I completely agree.
I spend way too much time.
But yeah, so I mean, what we're going to do in this session, apart from kind of reminiscing about how the project went and kind of getting all teary-eyed, is we're going to kind of cover a few more of the kind of the optimization things we did, because again, we did kind of realize that once we pulled the project down and we started cleaning it up, that we went a little bit dark, kind of dark on on telling people what we were doing and showing people what we were doing. So we wanted to make sure that this project was up and out, even though there's still so much more that we want to do to it. But we wanted people to get, be able to get it in their hands so that we could start kind of like making it more transparent and showing people what we're working on a bit more quickly. So yeah, definitely if you have any questions about the project, anything about the sample that you'd like to know about, just post in the chat and we'll get to them as we can. But otherwise, yeah, we'll just start looking at the project and kind of talking about some of the stuff that we did.
Do it. Let's dig in. And yeah, for anyone in chat who has questions as they come up, make sure you just put like question at the front of it so it's easy for myself and our mods to collect. And we'll just start peppering poor Aaron and Sam here as they're trying to focus on other things with questions as we go on.
Cool. So I think there's some stuff that I really wanted to start off with because it's stuff that we didn't know about. Kind of when doing open world stuff for Unreal, because obviously all of this tech is actually still reasonably new. It's only a couple of years old. So while we've been doing a lot with world partition and world building, like building out at this scale is still quite new territory for us. Internally, a lot of the people who worked, kind of on Fortnite obviously have, quite a big map to explore, but a lot of that content is, it's very modular. A lot of it gets swapped in and out when they do new seasons, and it's also not actually that big. Ultimately, at the end, it's a reasonably contained island. The Lego Fortnite map is significantly bigger. It's about 16 kilometers, I think, though I'd have to go back and check. But that map is not like a fixed map. It's procedurally generated out of lots and lots of different chunks. So they never actually have to deal with this kind of experience where they're building this whole thing, right? Like they have, it's all kind of quite nicely chunked and held up for us. One of the big issues that we had was with our HLOD generation and trying to get good looking results from a distance. And one of the things that we ran into when we were kind of building them out was our landscape kept on having these quite ugly, kind of checkerboard black lines along the edges of all of the bake result, which I think is a bug in the engine that we just didn't get fixed in time because we don't have enough good examples of this stuff to see when these kind of issues crop up. But actually, what we found is that a much better solution to generating HLODs that bake a texture. So that's how kind of like the normal content works. If you see this chunk of landscape, normally when you generate HLODs, the landscape will make a texture that's at however big a size it needs to be. Whether that's like a 512 by 512 texture, and it will do that for like a diffuse and a normal and kind of whatever other masks you want, and it will generate that texture out and it'll apply it to that asset. What we actually do now is we just use the SVT, which is basically like a MIPed version of the RVT. So for those of you who don't know, RVT stands for runtime virtual texture, which is basically a very, very large texture that is it's virtualized, so it's very, very efficient streaming, and two, it's dynamic. So it basically, all of the stuff that can write into the runtime virtual texture, so all of the stuff that can render to it, is doing it purely dynamically based on like the player's location and what you can currently see. So that makes it a bit tricky because the texture doesn't always exist when you might need it to. And one of the examples here is if you generate HLOTs and you're sampling the RVT, you'll sometimes find that the mesh just renders black because the actual RVT itself doesn't exist. So I think we cleared up most of the meshes, but we must have left one.
You won't find it today,
here.
but someone will post it on social media in like 2 days.
We must have an RVT that got me there.
There
Right,
we go.
okay. So you can see on these ones where we've missed these meshes, right, that they're rendering just black on the HLOD. And that's because this mesh is basically saying, I just want to render the RVT on the top of this material. And when you're playing in game, it's fine because the RVT has been processed and it is running. And that means that you have like an end result that it can use. But when you're generating your HLODs, you don't have that. You basically have nothing. It's not been rendered. And that's why your HLODs will render black whenever you have too much HLOD generation. And what we found is that actually, while the runtime virtual texture is fully dynamic, it will also generate an SVT, which is basically the fallback for it, the MIPed version. So we have the RVT here, the RVT here, and then we have the SVT, the streaming texture, which is a static generated image. So what we can do is we can use that as our HLOD instead, and this is great because this is a texture we've already kind of paid for and we're already using. So on our landscape, what we actually ended up needing to do is if we go to our landscape, if we can find it. Oh, another useful thing as well. When you're in this level, there are so many assets. There is a lot of content. Just make sure that you tick to hide all of the assets you're not currently loading, and it will narrow it down much more quickly, which is really useful. So if you go to your landscape, you can set your landscape material and your whole material if you want to put holes in it. But then you can also specify, I'm not going to look for, I'm just going to type it in. You can also specify a HLOD material override. And that's what we ended up doing for the project. So again, I can't take credit for this. This is, again, one of the great benefits of working at Epic is that I can just go into our Slack channel and say, help, how do I do this? And then some really, really smart person on the engine team can be like, oh, well, you can just use this instead. And then, which is exactly what I did. So what we basically did is just made this material that takes the RVT, and then we just pushed the MIP level until we were sampling the SVT. So basically the MIP will use smaller and smaller texture size RVTs until it goes into the SVT. So if you just force it down to the lowest, then it's going to just use the SVT for its material. And then basically all of these assets now are no longer generating unique textures because they're just using that SVT. They're no longer generating unique material layers. They're all just using that same standard material, which makes everything much cheaper and much more efficient. So actually, not only did we get rid of those nasty, kind of black edges where we had texture bleed on it, we also dumped quite a considerable amount of texture data that we no longer needed because we were just using the SVT. So if you're building a big open world and you need a good solution for this, then I highly recommend it because it's a great way of doing it. And I did say to the engine team after, I'm just like, why don't we just default to this? This seems like this seems like an all-win situation, but obviously we can't because you're not necessarily always going to have an RVT. But yeah, it was a good solution for us in the end that worked very well.
Yeah, if you're generating HLODs, especially for a very large environment like we are, you're gonna likely run out of memory too. So the more efficient you can do it, the better it'll be.
Yeah. I don't know if we've got any questions on that. Otherwise, I can move on to the next tip.
I wouldn't say there's questions about that in particular.
We can do any questions.
We
I'm
can-
happy
yeah.
with that.
Okay. We have some questions that have come in. None of them are directly related to what you're talking about, but if you're open to just me
If they're
throwing
related,
whatever we get.
I will draw the line. As long as they're related to Project Titan, we can discuss. I'm very happy for this to be chat led. So chat, kind of tell us what you want to talk about, and we will go over that. I'm just filling the silence until we get some good questions.
Reminiscing on the good old process here. All right, sure. Let's I'll throw a couple at you and then I'll let you go back to the next tip after that, and then we'll just kind of go back and forth there. First question here is, when the sample project is updated, will a list of fixes and or changes be released anywhere along with it?
I love that you are that optimistic that I'm that organized. We will certainly try. What we will probably do is try and focus on new releases per engine release. And at that point, we'll probably do other videos and other content that's going to talk about it. We want to get a docs page set up as well on this that kind of goes over the actual sample itself, which we still need to do. But yeah, once all the new functionality is added, we'll make sure that we do a big song and dance over it because it's cool content.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. The next question here, I'm gonna steal for myself actually, just because I can. I have the answer to this one. There's someone who was wondering if there was any way for them to see what the process was like as the project was being built. And yes, kind of. There was a series of live streams that actually happened while the jam was going on itself that Aaron himself led. Had on a series of wonderful and incredible guests, as well as Sam and Sebastian. And you can get some really cool insight on what the project was like as it was being built through that. That's available in a playlist on our YouTube channel at Unreal Engine. So go check that out. Shameless plug. I
Yeah,
stole that
those
question
live
from you.
streams, there's just always one person commenting on how tired I look.
Yeah, you can watch us lose our minds
They
in
don't
real
realize I
time.
always look like this. This is my
Yeah.
I've like resting tired face.
This is called game development face. This is just how we look. But yeah,
You both are beautiful.
the lives, thank you. Live streams where you could also, if you watch us get stubblier and crazier looking over the 10 weeks, it's pretty great. Or I'm like, wow, I really look like I'm going through it, that one.
Week four is a rough week now.
I think week 10 I'm wearing like a trash bag or something. I just
I'm speaking a language I made up. It's great.
But we got cool swag, so
This is true. This is true.
Mm-hmm.
Worth it in the end, just for that.
Yeah, it was just for that. Yeah.
Wearing my,
Yeah.
This
tight
is
swag.
way too hot for me, actually.
Yeah, it's actually really warm.
Boiling. I've worn it for a little bit, so I've got I'm representing at the first part of the live stream, so it's fine.
I'll hold down for it.
There you go. Thank you, Sam. Next question here, and you sort of briefly talked a little bit about this one, but is there a plan to do a gameplay loop from Epic side?
Yeah, so not necessarily a full gameplay loop. I mean, don't ever expect there to be like a full game out of this, because we just don't need to, right? Like the goal of the project is to demonstrate how you would go about setting this stuff up. And that's what we want to do with the project. So we want to do, definitely like some kind of quest system, some kind of dialogue system, just basically anytime there is like a trope in an open world game, we want to cover that. So that people have it as a good starting base, and that's kind of why we put, it's why we put gliding in, because it's become ubiquitous with so many open world games now, that it's kind of like a default starting point. So we definitely want to put all of those different elements in. We want to have, kind of like bandit camp spawning and, and some kind of combat in there. Although it will be very light touch, we basically just want to do enough to prove out that this is how you build the system. This is how you design quests. This is how you introduce NPCs into the world in a way that's kind of like that is actually going to work. So we want to do all of that. We just don't want to do it as like a full game, because you don't really need to have like 400 quests to see how that's done. You just need to have like 4
quests,
like just enough to show you this is how the system works and this is how you set it up and this is how it scales, without having that in there. So in terms of the actual world itself, Titan will always feel empty, because when we don't need that much to prove it, right? Like, again, the way that the world streams in data and content, we've shown how you build the world at that scale, but we don't actually need every single cell in that world to be filled with stuff, as long as we've got enough of them that shows this is how you handle streaming and this is how you load that content in and out. That proves it, that demonstrates the purpose. And to do more would just bloat the project even more, because what I would also like, is to get that download size much smaller, both the the end package result and also for the download, because like 80 gig is it's quite a lot. I mean, it's not for a game. And actually, if you package up the project, it's significantly smaller as well. It's nowhere near 80 gig by any stretch. But it's one of those things we just want to make sure that we've got all of the core points in there that demonstrate how that stuff works.
Awesome. Cool. I've got 2 more questions I'm going to toss at you for now, and then I'll let you do your next tip. There are other questions I want to make sure I specify just so chat doesn't worry. There are more questions, and we are seeing and collecting them all. We're just making sure we're bouncing back and forth. So keep asking. We're collecting them all. I promise you, we see them. Next one here is, what was the most difficult part of the project now that you have released it?
Oh my God. Sam? What was the? I'm not saying Sam was the most difficult
Yeah, it
part
was
of the
me.
project there. I meant like, Sam, do you have a
I was
thing?
like,
I
nobody
can't
use
think of anything.
Nanite. Everybody make trees with tons and tons of holes in them. I think honestly, the toughest part of the project was, so after the art jam was done, we had this huge thing, big formless world full of stuff, and just going through it and finding the stuff that wasn't completed or the stuff that needed to be optimized, and making sure that we could pay attention to enough of the world that we could, get it to this to a state where we could give it back to put it back out into the world in a way that's useful to people, because there was so much work done. We didn't want anyone's work to be represented poorly, and we didn't want to ship unfinished things. So it was just, yeah, just a massive amount of small tasks is kind of how I see it more than anything else. Like, there was no one giant thing that was bad, though we could talk. There are plenty of tips that Aaron will give that will sort of highlight the things that were large issues we ran into, as much as there was just a lot of different stuff to go through. And each person worked slightly differently. So you're like, okay, well, this person built their materials like this and their structures like this, and that's okay, except for here where it's not performant. We see what we can do there and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that would be my answer. Just the sheer scope of the thing it's the size of Stalker 2, which, large game.
I mean, it's really hard. I don't think I have. I think Sam's right. I think it's not necessarily there was like a single hardest thing. It's kind of like the culmination of all those things that were hard. But like, honestly, we got so lucky with so much of this stuff when we were doing it. I said that in
Really?
my in my talk in Prague. When we were talking about building a world with thousands of people, and like we did so much prep that we didn't need on how to handle bad actors, that like I was just kind of a bit in shock every single week that we had just a bunch of really nice, wholesome people just building really cool stuff with us, and taking all the feedback that we were giving, really well and in their stride and stuff. Like my background before I joined Epic, I did indie dev, and I was also lecturing at a university, and the how people react to feedback can vary wildly. Some people can take it very, very well, and some people can take it very not well.
Well,
So kind of having hundreds and hundreds of people who statistically you'd think, well, we're going to have a couple of people in here who just don't don't care, or are going to be really defensive about it. Actually,
not
we
really.
just didn't
Yeah.
have that problem. And then we had like a bunch of mods come in who just literally kind of like take the wheel. It's fine. We'll handle it. Kind of doing all this stuff. And the same, like, again, all the people at Epic who just jumped in and kind of like, well, like, this is awesome. Yeah,
What
how
can I
can I
do?
help?
Yeah, exactly.
We
And
had
I
so many
mean,
people doing that. Like, again, Tina was one of them. And then we had, Dan, who's in the background hiding away. You can't
thanks,
see him.
Dan.
He did, he was
Those live
basically
streams.
managing our live stream every single week for us. He didn't know he was doing that at the start of the year.
Just kind of sprung it on
He
him.
was like, yeah, let's do it. It was, so it was really good. And like, same with all of the different people in the engine team. We had a guy from DevOps just come in and be like, here's Cloud DDC. That's how you set that up, and it's working for you. and stuff like that. We had all the people from Perforce sat in our Discord for the entire 10-week period that we didn't know we were going to have again,
So
who like
nice.
saved our butts
Bacon,
on
yes.
numerous occasions.
Yeah.
So yeah, like we kind of just, I just kind of felt like I glided through on this like cloud of luck for a load of it. Like it was just like, oh yeah, it worked. And then like a load of people were looking at us going, how the hell did you do that? And
Yeah, everybody said we were mad. Like that's the thing is you go into Epic and go, oh hey, engine team, we're working on this thing, and the first response would be, "You're mad." The second one would be, "That's amazing. What can I do?" Which is sort of the attitude of everybody. And yeah, I mean, it was so rare for us to have to step in on the Discord and be like, "Okay, everybody, calm down." Everyone resolved their disputes cleanly. Like it was just like all the things you hope for in a community, which is having been in many online communities, not often the case. Often there's always there's an element of drama and chaos, and here it was just a bunch of nice people all working together to do a cool thing, which was lovely.
yeah. And it's like especially like I've seen a bunch of people talking about how you manage a community and how you manage it and making sure that it doesn't go toxic. Um, and most of the time like they say you've just got to like force it, like you've got to be really proactive and really on it, and like that was not me in any sense, like, but we we kind of just got away with it. I mean maybe it's just because we only ran for a very set period of time, so the toxicity
Mutate
didn't have
into
time to
evil.
set in or something, I don't know, but like it was just fine, like we just
Yeah.
everyone was really cool
Our
and
main
awesome.
directive was just play nice. Everyone needs to play nice with each other, and it should go well. And people did.
Yeah, and we got to
Yeah.
meet a bunch of them in real life as well, which is really cool. We went to so I did Unreal Fest Prague, and so did Sam. Sam did all of them. He's the
Road warrior.
yeah. Um, so yeah, he did that. It was Seattle, I think, Unreal Fest
Yeah.
Seattle. And there were a bunch of people there, and they all came up and they all said how much fun they had. And we've got a little Discord section where people who did the jam can like review it and say how it went and give us their feedback. And it's just been glowing. Like people have been so nice about it and how much they enjoyed it. It's been really cool.
Yeah. It was amazing. Like I completely agree with everything you're saying, even just from uh watching it for the most part, because this was y'all's child jam. This was your creation, right? And I felt like I got to just kind of see most of it from the sidelines. I helped a little bit here and there. Your original Discord was not that bad. I feel like I need to
Was
throw that out.
No, honestly,
It
you
was
should have
pretty
seen it.
bad.
I wish I'd taken a screenshot of it now. It was the saddest looking Discord you've ever seen. There were no, kind of like there were no little like little emojis next to all of the things. It was just like
No flair.
general chat
It was
environment.
a
And then that
brutal.
was kind
It
of
was
like
very
it. And then I had like an
brutalist.
admin section that no one else could see. And I was like, this seems fine.
But yeah, it was what was
It
nice was
worked.
the Discord just became a place that was part of my regular cycle in the day. I get up, see what's going on, go, okay, well, this is some stuff I need to check out. I'll go look at this area. This group needs feedback. This group's stuck on this thing. And yeah, it was just, yeah, it was like slipping into a warm pool every day. It was really pleasant and nice.
Yeah, it was really awesome to see everyone collaborate so well together. And I think a huge part of it was also that everyone who was taking part of it was taking it seriously.
Hmm.
I didn't see anyone who didn't seem like they were really serious about their part of it and wanting to make sure that this entire project they were all building together was ultimately successful. And that was really, really cool, just seeing the level of dedication that went into this
Yeah.
from the community
Yeah,
and of
it was,
course y'all too, but
that's
No,
our
but I mean, like,
jobs, you
we
know?
have to be professional, right?
Yeah.
Like, to some extent, but like, I didn't go into each meeting in a suit or anything, but like the the level of professionalism for people who are just like, oh, there's a game jam and I can go on and build some art, and you're like, it's not exactly setting a tone, but like they were so good about it. Like they were so, kind of rock solid on it. They just wanted it to work, and they were absolutely dedicated. And you're just like, it's like, why? Like, why are you doing this?
Yeah,
I mean, I'm glad you are, but why?
yeah, I really it was exciting seeing, yeah, it's like someone would join because we let people in kind of a staggered way over a couple of weeks, and so new people would join, we get an influx, and you when at first we're like, okay, we got to be there, we got to be ready to like people come in, we'll give them guidance. The community did it all. Like people would arrive and be like, okay, go here, look at this, look at this. If you're interested in a biome, just go over here and say hi to the biome group and what you do and what you're interested in. And it just kind of, yeah, people trickled in and it worked. So yeah, our community management, our community guideline is do the least amount possible and have Tina set up your Discord. That is what we recommend.
Yeah, and then
Just like light
get
touch.
insanely lucky.
Yeah, have really
Insanely
nice
lucky
people.
one.
But I do feel like the light touch did help. I think that is a thing that we did is we tried really hard to not be heavy-handed about it. Be like, no, you must do it this way and do this. We're like, we'd like you to do these things.
Yeah. Also,
If
I
you
don't know
could.
how it happened, but everyone did end up being quite scared of me, I think, and I don't quite know why.
Because you're terrifying.
They're
Have we met
terrified,
you?
like, because we had that moment where we had the to get slightly off topic, I guess, but we had that moment where because we had a swag channel where we would add people if they'd done some cool stuff and they got some swag, and I went in and I added like 60 people, and then like the general chat just exploded with like, oh my God, Aaron's just added me to a chat. He's just gonna be, don't do that. And then one was like, I'm gonna have a heart attack. So yeah, that was. I didn't realize I'd engendered that much fear because I
We
kind
were
of
just
just
wanted to give you hoodies.
want to give you some cool
Everybody
stuff.
calm down.
Fine. But I guess like I should have seen it coming, I guess, because up until that point, like if someone did made like a problematic asset or did something that had an issue, like I would just say, "Oh, hey, you've done this wrong. Can you go in and fix it?" Which I always thought was very light touch, but maybe that was just my perception of it, and actually it was like some kind of terrifying hammer coming down on them, and
You're like a
because they
Dark
did do it
Souls
quickly. In
boss.
fairness, whenever I said something, they fixed it very fast. So maybe they were terrified the entire time. But I
You would
don't know.
smash through their ceiling in a cloud of dust and smoke. Be like,
Fix this.
you.
Who has broken the map today?
But you know, one of the goals of this really was to provide people with a chance to see what it's like, not exactly like, but to work on the equivalent of an open world sort of AAA collaborative project where, you know, usually you'd have to be working at Epic or Ubisoft or somewhere to be working on a game like that, working somewhere in the AAA space. So a chance to come in and do that and collaborate with each other in a shared server. We're all doing the one file per actor thing, but also deal with feedback from people who may not one do what you do or have the full context of what it is that you do. Because if you work in game development, there are going to be people who review your work who don't know you from anybody else and are just like, what is this thing?
Mm.
So yeah, it's and people generally handled it pretty well, but it was trying to give people the experience of, okay, your work is going to be reviewed, you're going to get critique, you're going to get feedback, we're going to ask you to change things sometimes. Maybe not so many skulls. It was a recurring theme with me. Funny because I have so many skulls in this office right now, but I just keep them off camera. But yeah, we had a plague of giant skulls for a while, and that was, I think, the bit where people were like, "Oh, maybe Sam's mean." Like, no more skulls, please. Love you, skulls.
No
I
one
like
was
skulls. I
me.
like games with skulls in them, but it kind of was starting to become very grim dark in the world of Titan. And apparently making my dog very upset too. If you can hear him on the live stream.
Wants to join the conversation here. I get it.
But yeah, it was really nice giving people that experience though. Like, I mean, Epic, our Unreal Game Sync, which is kind of how you view all of the submits that people are making. We have tons of different streams. So we have like different staging streams for the engine and the release, and we have main, and you can see all of this stuff on GitHub because there's all of the different kind of streams through there. But then we have, you've got that, and then you've got the Fortnite kind of like equivalent that's pushing stuff through to the engine version as well, and then they have different streams as well. But like if you look at every single one of those, there's at least one submit every minute, and like for every hour of the day. because there's, like Epic's global, right? Like there are people it's always awake, kind of no matter what. So like you're going through, if you like, sometimes I just sit and like just like look at the submits going into it, and to see like that level is just insane. So to give people a taste of that is something that's really, really hard to do, because you do require those kind of like just that mass of people who are all like contributing. And while we didn't get anywhere near close to, one submit a minute, we did have a lot. I think the final submit count was like, is it like 18,000? I'm trying to remember the slides now. It was something like
I
that.
think it might have been, it was some ridiculous number, it seemed.
Yeah,
So yeah, it
because
might have been 18,000.
we had like 200,000 files, didn't we? And then it was like 18,000 submits, which in a 10-week period again is crazy.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring up the numbers right now.
Yeah. That's what I
I
was
did
doing
a
too. I was
talk
like,
on
I
it.
think I have those somewhere too.
Yeah.
Who'll get the first?
Scrolling through my
I do want
slides.
to mention, I saw in chat here, someone said we were all terrified when you were pinging people, because this was around the same time they were getting pinged for critiques as
Yeah.
well. So they're like, what is the ping for? Is it for swag or am
sorry.
I getting yelled at?
So
Also, I was amazed by how many people didn't know what swag meant. Because like, yeah, I mean, we talk about it so much, I guess, internally at Epic, that I guess
Yeah,
it's
it's
kind of
not.
like a ubiquitous thing. But actually, like, we had like quite a lot of people, and again, like maybe this is just because it's global, it's like doesn't necessarily translate straight away. But like, we had lots of people going, "What swag? Like what? Like what is that?"
it's presenting a certain attitude when you walk and exist in society.
Yeah,
Also,
like,
free stuff that we
yeah,
give
it's
you.
free stuff. It's free stuff.
But
I
yeah, so we
think, yeah,
had
they're
200
probably merch,
sorry,
but
Yeah, I guess we could have called it merch, but
229,444 check-ins.
wow.
what?
So 229,444 check-ins, 18,839 change lists.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the change list. Yeah. Okay.
So that was a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, and I deleted a lot of those.
Then you wonder why people are scared of you. The mighty
Right?
hand of
Deleting
God
stuff.
comes down and crushes dreams. To be fair, I
Again,
deleted
so
some
on
stuff
the
too.
for those of you, because obviously some of this may be going over your head if you weren't part of the actual project itself, but all of the critique videos that we did um, are on that EDC page. So if you go over to our EDC and learning, there's a section on Titan with mini tutorials. Right at the bottom are just critiques where we go through a different region and we just talk about it and how areas are working and how some areas aren't and things like that. We do one on textures, that's particularly important. If you have a look at them, we've done another one on Nanite, which I also did as a talk as well. So that content's already out there. But then all of the ones where we just go, let's have a look at the desert region, and we just like we fly around and we look at different bits and we talk about what works and what doesn't work. We did a lot of that. We were constantly critiquing, because again, like it's something that's just part of the industry, right? It's an absolutely vital, critical part of it. So we wanted to make sure that people had that experience, and also it's a really good way of getting better work, because people then know how to build better.
Some of those videos are my design videos where it's less specific technical knowledge and more here is philosophy and sort of intent behind design. So when you're building out a space, things you need to think about, like player character, it's a third-person game. Think about the camera. Think about the player's experience moving through the space. And if you like, one of the big ones we hit was with procedural generation, because PCG kind of ran wild through Titan for a bit. It was like kind of like one of those alien infestation movies. But we ended up with some really good results. But a lot of it was getting people to think about PCG as more than just spawning a bunch of stuff, but instead trying to apply some logic to it. So you're spawning something that looks like a real biome, like a mangrove forest or like a swamp or whatever should look like a swamp, and there are rules to that. And so it becomes not just spawning a bunch of meshes, but really applying some deeper logic to your PCG. And the end result of that is we have some really nice PCG in the final thing because people really took that to heart. But yeah, we tried to highlight work that we thought represented what we were going for well, which I think is a key thing because it's already in Titan, so other people could then go look at it and go, oh, look how they did their doors, look how they did their roofs, look how the space is laid out, how much breathing room the player has, all that kind of stuff. And you could then see that refracted back through other people's work in the game. And so we were all kind of lifting each other through the critique process. It wasn't just top down. It tended to then like spread through everybody else. So if you're sort of new to environment layout or sort of how to art direct an environment or anything like that, those critique videos are super useful just as a working example of what the kind of work you have to do. Well, that was a monologue.
That's what we're here for. We're here to hear your thoughts on this project. Saying we're here to hear really messed with me for a second. I straight up short circuited. I was like, oh, wait a second.
Here to listen?
That's better. Yeah,
there you
that's
go.
better. All right, next question I've got for y'all here is, do you and/or the artists in the projects find themselves interested in building border zones between the biomes? In such a large area, they're interested in hearing about how that process went on making sure that everything felt cohesive.
Yeah, we got
That was
some.
tough.
So I think that's probably where the only friction in the project came from, because they decided to group themselves by region. We had some Cold Wars,
Some border conflicts.
Border conflicts, yeah.
border conflicts that needed some mediation. I think, kind of like that was probably one of the only areas where there was ever something that we needed to go in and actively resolve. Though I think in most instances, again, that they
It
did
was
self-resolve
amicably resolved. Yeah.
with that stuff. But I think it did end up with, if you look at the Titan map, if we go back into it for a second, I think the areas where it kind of loses it a little bit is on some of those regional blends. So where it transitions to, kind of like to this area, to kind of like tropics, you get kind of like a bit of you get a bit of like a no man's land, occasionally happening with some of that stuff. We had it. We've tried to repopulate it, so it's a little bit
so
less bad
like
now, but up
Arctic
here,
the transition to Arctic was really challenging, I think, for a lot of people, just because it is such a different
yeah.
biome. And
This whole section along here, we did get the bunny characters got a little area over here, but yeah, this whole area kind of
that was
stayed
challenging.
kind of. No one really went near it. I mean, some of that's because Arctic was quite
It's austere.
yeah, they were quite off, but they kind of all packed at the back of the map here, which actually isn't really something that you want to do. Like you want to kind of discourage the player from going here, because you are right at the edge of the, kind of the game world, like the actual explorable game world. But for some reason, they all wanted to kind of build into these little crevices. So we've got like a bunch of those over here, and we've tried to keep them all in.
We made them too enticing.
We have the nice Iktu kind of temple over here. But all of these kind of areas right in the middle really kind of like stayed quite empty. And again, it's not something that we were that bothered about, because we don't need the map to be fully populated everywhere for it to serve its purpose. But it's definitely kind of ended up being a bit of a dead zone. Like again,
I spent a bunch of time after we ended the art jam basically doing transition spaces.
Yeah,
especially for Arctic,
though, which was
I think the most successful is Arctic, is desert to marshland and grassland. I think that one, because they built the carnival, they built this night market that kind of shares cultures. There are things that feels like multiple spaces meeting nicely. The marshland has a really nice mangrove swamp, so where it reaches the ocean, it makes sense. Like there was some really nice work put in there. So I wouldn't say every region has that issue. Some cases it's really nicely done. In some cases we had to go in and do a little bit of PCG to fill it out.
We did also have quite vastly different team sizes as well. Marshlands and grasslands particularly had
Huge.
a much higher number of developers kind of working in those regions, and as a result, those areas are much more densely packed with content. I would say Tropic as well had quite a decent
Yeah,
contingent of
tropics.
people. And I think, kind of the
Dense.
Sulfur team were looking quite enviously over the river, uh, all of the people who were kind of like working in this one, and I don't think they had quite as many. So a lot of that is just because the teams that are working in those regions just didn't have the resources because those people didn't want to work on it. It's probably, and again, that's probably a failure on us, to not have been a bit more proactive in trying to get people to distribute a bit more evenly, throughout the world. But
It does actually, it kind of works though, because the sulfur and volcanic regions are almost inherently more austere
Mhm.
because of the kind of landscapes they are, and the same with the Arctic to a certain degree. And so the sparseness kind of sells for me. The sulfur region has this it's a really beautiful, interesting kind of alien landscape that they built. And but yeah, so but would be nice to have been able to give the other teams a bit of a hand there.
Mm. Yeah, no, I love sulfur as well. It's really cool.
Yeah, that's why I have my player start there.
Mhm. They really took the region and just went, okay, let's go
The
really
wild.
really crazy. Yeah,
Yeah,
let's actually kind of like what this is a completely inhospitable region. Let's build some stuff that you wouldn't normally see that's kind of able to thrive there, and they came up with some really cool stuff,
great shapes,
for that area.
really good shapes.
Some of the best foliage is in, or some of the, I would say, the most kind of like creative foliage is in volcanic and, in sulfur. They've got some really cool stuff. Like, there's the one in sulfur, in volcanic, where it expands as you get closer to it, like it's gonna burst, which is really cool. And they've got some really nice shader work. And same with sulfur, they've got some really nice kind of like super, kind of like non-realistic, almost like alien, kind of like growing stuff like this. It's really nice.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah.
And but
They've
yeah, I
Really
got some.
cool
think
stuff.
the transition regions were definitely a challenge, and I think part of the issue is that just 10 weeks is not a lot of time to fill out a biome, let alone work out how they connect. So people did their best with kind
Yeah,
of the
they
time
had a
they
job.
had.
They had a job on their hands. I mean, like again, like we kind of pulled that time out of thin air, right? Like there wasn't really any calculation to it. We were just like, how long? We did some rough calculations on how long is it, how much money would it cost us to run a server for an X amount of time, and kind of benchmarked it off some very rough numbers from, from stuff like Fortnite to give us like a real like worst case scenario, how much would this cost, which we came nowhere near to. um, but we kind of felt like we also didn't want to take up too much of people's time on that stuff as well, right? Like it's because ultimately, like it's an art jam, and it's like it's it's something that could be quite time consuming. So if we'd run for like 6 months or something, I really feel like we'd have been taking you know
We
the
might
biscuit on
also
that.
have died. That
That's
might have
true.
happened.
Yeah. So 3 months seemed like a reasonable, kind of a reasonable pitch. Kind of we go for about 3 months, and that gives people enough time to build something, and kind of get it in. That's what we ended up with.
Those last
Yeah.
2 weeks were pretty fly by the seat of your pants. It was
Yeah,
pretty amazing going, wow, look at those Perforce check-ins go. Everyone's like, oh no, got to get it in. And then, of course, our server imploded, and we had a very harrowing 4 hours before Sebastian and the Perforce people got it back up.
it was fine.
Nothing, yeah, that's what source control is for. We
Yeah.
lost very little work. It all worked out. It was just 7 a.m. I'm like, oh no, what's happening?
It was crazy. I do think 10 weeks or the about 3 months time frame that you ended up picking was kind of perfect because I think it's if you give too much time, then it's easy to maybe lose that initial steam that people get, especially for things with jams, right? But it was enough time to make something really cool and interesting, but it wasn't enough time to burnout, right? It was right on that cusp, on the
Yeah,
cusp of
right.
burnout.
Like we just the random. It just goes to show you again, like the random number that we pulled out our backsides was happened to just be the exact right thing that we needed, and we can't take any credit for it. We
From
just
luck.
we just quietly accept that we got lucky, and we're grateful for it.
It was awesome. It was really cool seeing it all together. Speaking of numbers, this is not a question from chat, but I want to throw it out because I thought it was interesting. That number did change over time, right? Because originally, I think you were only assuming that maybe like 1,000 people would join up or something like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that number kept increasing over time.
6,000?
So yeah, so okay, so originally when we started, we were thinking we'll get about 1,000 people, and hopefully we'll have kind of like 100 of those people or 200 people will actually kind of participate, and we'll scale to the point where we know that we can accommodate 1,000 people if we need to, but we're kind of like we know that most of the people who kind of like sign up to things on ArtStation generally like don't necessarily just have the time to do it in the end, or they get sidetracked by something else or
Totally
whatever.
fair.
Like there's a ton of reasons why, like I've done it before where I've signed up for a challenge and I've been like, I actually don't have time. Um, so I kind of looked at the previous ArtStation challenges, and kind of whittled them down to, okay, let's just look at um, the disciplines that we're going to be offering. So on ArtStation, they usually offer like 10 to 12 different disciplines. They do a 2D track, and they also do a film and TV track as well as games. So there's a much broader variety, and they normally get about 3,000 to 2,500 people sign up to those. So I was like, oh, okay, well, we're kind of offering like a third of the tracks, so we'll get a third of the people. Um, and then that wasn't the case. I think by the time the actual jam launched, we were sitting at about 3,000 people. And if you actually go onto the ArtStation challenge now, there's like 5,500 people.
Mhm.
So we gained another 800 people on launch. So when we did that first live stream where we were kind of showing the project, we gained another 800 people. And then basically every week we would add the new kind of batch of people that had come in into the Discord server and into the Perforce server. So yeah, that number was slightly unexpected, but it kind of worked because we ended up with like 600 people, I think, actively contributing, and then about 1,500 who kind of like made contributions at some point. So that worked really well. I think we've lost Tina
I think we
potentially.
might have, or she turned into a green triangle, which would
No,
be
no, not again.
disconcerting. She
But
doesn't do
yeah,
that on camera usually.
so yeah, I mean, we can talk a bit more about numbers because we had some good, we got some really good stats out of that as well. Like Sam said, with the number of submits that we had and the number of things, we also got, kind of like monetary stats as well, like how much this stuff cost us, which a lot of people don't necessarily get access to or don't know about. But we kind of found out that actually you can run a relatively cheap Horde server for like $8 or $9 a day, which is pretty good. Like something you can just have automating tasks and stuff like that. It obviously does need to scale at some point. Like when we first started out, we were getting away with like literally the $8 HLOD generation for our world that was doing it kind of daily, and it was just ticking along and it was fine. And then obviously once the world got more densely populated and it needed more memory, then we had to increase that up. And in the end, we spent about like $25,000 on the whole shebang, right? And the vast majority of that was cloud DDC. So it's one of those really interesting things where it's kind of a bit you don't necessarily think about it or know about it until you scale up. So it's not something that you are ever really going to need if you're a very small dev team. It's something that's for the big, big studios and big teams out there. But boy, does it make a difference to your load times. if you've got it on and enabled. So basically, it's Cloud DDC is just distributing all of that kind of pre-computed, kind of shader work, all of that stuff that's kind of that needs to be pre-calculated. If someone has already done it, then it just streams it for you, rather than making your computer do it. So we didn't even have it on for the first 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I think, because the project just wasn't big enough to require it. But once we got a lot of content starting to come in, it made a massive difference once we had it enabled. So we had that set up in 4 different regions around the world, so that people could kind of like stream all that content. And yeah, if you're in a large studio and you're not using Cloud DDC, which I hope you already are, then it's well worth the investment for kind of like speed up time. It's a bit like Incredibuild. I kind of compare it to, like, it's a very large cost, for a very big gain. So like, you've got to make sure that that thing is worth it, but like, it usually is once you get up to a certain scale. Tina, have we got you back?
Yes, I'm back. That was,
You turned into a
man.
green triangle for a moment. We all got very concerned.
I know. I don't know what to tell you. It just sometimes I get these moods, right? And I feel like being a green triangle
Yeah, I
sometimes,
know. I get it. I turn into a capsule every now and then. It's
You
just
know?
Yeah, I'm just a collision capsule sometimes. I lose my mesh altogether.
Yeah, and it's just certain shapes they call to you and there's nothing you can do about it. So,
triangle is very game dev oriented. It works.
yeah, right? Oh, it's not usually me who's getting the like straight up tech issues. So, great takeover there, Aaron. That was awesome.
Fine.
All right. I have more questions. Unless you
Awesome.
have things that you want to show. I don't want to take all of your time.
I'm happy to let the chat dictate.
We can show
Yeah,
things
go
as
for it.
the questions bring it up.
All right. Next question here then that I'm gonna toss y'all's way is, we actually mentioned this one earlier, but I'm gonna toss it at you again just in case anyone missed it. Can we get guides or access to the guides that you created and were used during the jam?
Yes, we can definitely post those up. We'll get PDFs and add them to the mini tutorial log. We didn't bother doing them because so few people read them during the art jam that we kind of just figured that they weren't useful.
It's
But
almost like
Sam put a lot of time into those docs, so yeah, it'd be nice if someone read them.
I did write a 70-page Perforce setup guide, step by step. At least 4 people used it, so
Yeah, I think so. We know the mods read the Perforce, well, all of the docs, because basically that was their entire job for the art jam, was answering questions that had been
we're in the
answered.
docs. They were just like, here it is.
So they basically would just kind of, they read it, they understood it, and then they answered all of the questions of people going like, oh, why doesn't my login work? It's like, you have to use the username they gave you and make sure you put SSL at the start of the IP and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It was kind of interesting seeing what were the stumbling blocks for people in the editor. Like, people weren't used to using world partition and going, oh, well, you actually have to load in the region if you want to see it. What you're seeing right now is the HLODs of the region, and stuff like that was confusing, because if you haven't worked in this kind of setup before, then how would you know? You're like, my world disappears when I get close to it.
And also, that wasn't a thing until 5.4.
Yeah.
So that was understandable.
Yeah.
It confused people. Yeah.
Yeah, that one was just new. So I do get that one.
Careful.
Key
I'm
is-
hoping at some point we get actual live streaming in the editor, which I think is the end goal.
There is a reason I added the load selected regions text to the landing screen when you run Project Titan. You need to know which option is best for loading in your world partition too, because there's like 3.
Yeah. I feel like, diverting a little bit, I do want to take a second to make like a small specific call out for the mods. Are you losing me again? No.
No, we got you.
Okay. We're continuing. Nothing is happening on my screen in case anyone is wondering. Um, so I do want to call out the mods though specifically because there was everyone who participated was fantastic, of course, but there definitely was a group of folks who did end up becoming like moderators in the Discord channel and stuff who were just particularly wonderful. So want to make sure give some extra love to those folks because they were great.
Yeah, and I think I see have seen Klukul, who was obviously our kind of almost our lead mod in the end. He's like translating slowly into the Epic Indies Discord as well.
Yeah.
So it's good to see him. He's got to find a new home now. The Titan one is like slowly dying. But yeah, no, those mods were just excellent. Like Alk and
Wonderful.
and Clue Cool and Pi and kind of all of them were just they were vital. Like because it just like if we didn't have them, we would have spent the entire time just sat there answering those questions over
Yeah,
and over again.
absolutely.
And it meant that we could kind of let them handle that side of it, and we could just focus on like critique and writing tutorials and posting that big stuff that let people really kind of like see how it all worked, and kind of guiding people. It was really good.
Yeah, definitely. Right. I'm gonna be looking off to the side. But I am paying attention. But I have to swap monitor. So I am here.
Yeah.
I'm here with you. But I am looking over here. The next question here for y'all is other than RVT, SVT on HLODs, what were some other helpful optimizations made on this project? And how was the process of getting it running on Switch?
Complicated?
So, well, we never ran it on Switch in the end. We ran it on Android, and there's some good stuff for that. So, there's a couple. One of the big ones was making sure we had density scaling working on assets. I don't know if we've got it.
If you're doing PCG, make sure to enable density scaling. Make sure to set things as foliage class. We have a little bit of that in the overview video, but it is worth really mentioning. Also, when you're spawning meshes for PCG, make sure that they're set to be appropriate. Like, do you want them shadow casting? Do you want them static? Do you want them doing all the various things? And that's where you'll do your density scaling settings as well. But it means that you're spawning efficiently as opposed to just spawning lots of stuff.
So yeah, this is a good one, right? So you need to make sure you've got an enable density scaling, and you only want this on assets that basically don't have collision. That's a general good benchmark to do it, because you don't want to create any actual gameplay variants, right? This is all visuals. So if you enable this, it basically makes it work like foliage. I think you also have to use. I haven't checked it against
It has
all
to
of
be
them,
foliage, I
but I'm
believe.
fairly sure you need to be using the foliage instance static mesh component as well. I haven't checked it on the others, but I know it doesn't work on hierarchical. So just make sure you've got that as well. And then once you do that, basically inside your scalability settings, it'll basically start reducing based on is it foliage? Yeah, it's foliage. So that foliage scaler will basically increase or decrease based on whether you've got density scaling enabled on that. So we went through and we just made sure that all of the ground foliage, so basically not the trees because they need to have collision on, same with like the rocks of a certain size as well. I'm going through and I can't see any on here, but so like all of these things we enable density scaling on, and that just especially for the mobile target where you really need to get quite aggressive with density scaling on there and kind of performance in general. We went in and we enabled density scaling on all those PCGs, and again, this is a really nice thing about using PCG with this stuff is because you can just go and you can click on that asset. You can do it and then regenerate, and it's all fine. Like it's just reapplied with those settings. It makes it so much easier to manage, which is why we did try and push PCG with a lot of content, even if you're just running it through a bit of a PCG filter. It just means that you kind of get that performance hit. We also we did a lot of editor tooling as well, which was really, really useful. So inside our blueprint folder, there's a scriptable tools section where we kind of built up a couple of different options. Some of this stuff is very Titan specific. A really good one is this organizer that I wrote, which basically just goes in and prefixes names with their asset type. So it'll basically select all the assets and you tell it to go through and it'll run through and put SM underscore on anything that's a static mesh, and it'll prepend and append the texture name parameters. So make sure it's T underscore and then like underscore D or underscore R if it's for roughness and stuff like that. And the same with like materials and material instances. But like the editor scripting is so powerful. It's really really useful. You can use it for so much stuff. Like same with I wrote a texture swizzler, which is I just love saying. But it basically just lets you flip the RG and B textures to different ones on the actual texture result. So you can just go in, say R should be in G, G should be in B, B should be in R, like, you know, like that kind of thing. I don't know if that just made sense. But anyway, so that just goes in. It basically just generates a render target of the right size. It swizzles those textures round and puts them in. So that was really useful for just going through and processing that stuff. And we even wrote an imposter tool as well for the foliage meshes. So again, that's in Easy Imposter, because there is also a imposter generator inside the engine, but it's much more involved. It was written by someone significantly smarter than me, which is Ryan Brooks, and it does like these crazy, kind of like kind of billboard camera facing and like kind of like it's really smart stuff. I just went and built a very simple one because while that one is much better, like it's also a much more difficult to pick apart. So this one's a bit easier to do so. But that one's very easy because there's nothing in it. So if we go in and we go into here, basically all this does is it takes in a mesh. It generates a new LOD that's basically a card that's at the right size for that asset. It generates the diffuse, the normal, the mask texture, packs them together correctly, and then sets that to the last LOD, and it makes a new LOD if it needs to. But it sets it to the last LOD of the mesh, sets up the textures and the material, and does it all for you. So it's literally just one click on the asset. You right click and you generate the simple imposter, and it just does it. This was great because we could literally go in to all of our environments. Like we could search for tree, select them all, like right click, scripted actions, and then just tell it to generate simple card imposter, and then it would go in and just do it for every single one of those meshes. And now if we, I can do it on here, if I disable Nanite, because obviously you don't need cards. Sometimes you do, but this is really tricky. So this is one of the things that we always get called out on with Nanite, where they're like, oh, you're still generating LODs and things like that. And it's like, yes, we are. But that's because not all platforms support Nanite. So if you're building for multiple platforms, you still need to have LODs. And two, just because we don't need LODs anymore doesn't mean we don't need HLODs, right? Which are so very similar, and I can see why people get confused by it, but it's a different beast, right? So with HLODs, like we want to reduce instances, like global instances, because even though we have Nanite and we can render crazy numbers of triangles, we still have a hard instance count limit, which is not hard because you can increase it, but you generally can't do more than a couple of million instances total, right? So we need good ways of reducing down the number of instances we're using if we've got very densely populated scenes. So did I ever press enter? No, I didn't. There we go. I'll press enter and let that think about it for a minute.
Maybe while it's doing that, it's since Sebastian's not here, I will talk about his asset validators because which are also included with the project. So one of the things we did when we were cleaning up is we had to validate all the assets, make sure that as best as we could, they were set to the appropriate settings, static meshes, things like that, blueprint actors, because we had asked people not to blueprint, but when people did some blueprinting anyway, it happens. And so we had to review all the blueprints, but Sebastian wrote us these asset validators that tell you things like this has a construction script. All the meshes in this are set to dynamic. This is a shadow caster. And all the things that are just general optimization things you want to look out for. Or like generally we didn't want people using construction scripts because we have BCG. Should be using that. And so it let us just go through and do quick scrubs on large amounts of assets and identify problems pretty quickly because most assets were completely fine. And then you'd be like, why am I getting slowdown here? And you could validate the asset and you're like, oh yeah, this one is set bid. So we included those. You can use those in your own projects. They're really useful. Sebastian is an engineer. He wrote them in C++, but they're actually relatively self-explanatory if you look at them.
That was very good timing because it's finished loading.
I did that on purpose, I swear.
Yes, that was excellent.
Scripted.
So now hopefully you can tell, because again, like this is a very, very simple generator. Like the intention here was not to build like a super complex one because we already have that. That's included in the engine. It's a plugin you can enable called Imposter Baker, I think. But this kind of just shows the kind of stuff that you can do inside Unreal. So again, like you can see all of these distant cards, distant trees are now cards. So this isn't something we necessarily need for Nanite straight away, because actually for our art style, they were kind of very blocky trees. We actually just ended up letting them HLOD normally like all the other geometry, and they kind of just worked fine. But in many instances, you'd want to have like a HLOD fallback that used cards instead. And so for this instance, it works quite nicely for that as well. So we did a lot of scripting. Again, because we needed to brute force a lot of this stuff, right? Like we came in and we had like thousands and thousands and thousands of assets. So we needed something that we could do quickly and easily to just be like, give us a decent pass on this stuff that's going to let us process it easily. Same with like the bulk asset editor as well. Very useful, especially for like texture cleanup, where you just want to say, I just want all of these textures to be like virtual, or I want all of them to pad to power of 2 or scale to power of 2 because a bunch of people imported textures that weren't power of 2. Which again is very important. Please,
Powers of 2, folks.
Please bring in power of 2 textures.
16, 32, 64, 128, etc.
So yeah, stuff like that just let us kind of go in and very rapidly kind of go through that stuff and kind of brute force fix a lot of things that were kind of problematic. And this is why I never felt too bad about pointing out problems with people's assets either, because while I would generally pick like 1 or 2 assets to talk about a problem, I'd always say like, this is not this asset's problem alone. There are lots and lots of instances of this, because every time, we did a video, it was because we saw lots of instances of people doing the same wrong thing. And so while we did pick on people a little bit by being like, we're going to use your asset to demonstrate why this is not best practice, we always tried to say, this is an example of it. It is not the only one. There are lots and lots of things that are wrong with this, and we always tried to focus on that when we were doing it. I don't know. Again, maybe that's another reason why people were terrified of me by the end of this project, because I didn't do a good job of demonstrating that. But
you're like, this is only the failings of this one person in particular. It is just their failings, and we're here to call them out in front of all of you.
I also need to publicly apologize to the artists that worked on this temple area, because like at the final hour, the latest package build that we did for the release stripped this level out, this level instance out. So your version will probably look like this. There's going to be a hill with stuff missing. I'm working to get that back in as quickly as I can. I'm so sorry that's missing from the level. It's a really nice region as well. It did not get stripped out because there was stuff wrong with it. It was completely my fault. So I'm working to get that back in as quickly as I can. So yeah, sorry, Trinity Temple people.
It happens. It
Yeah.
happens. It's okay. I do
Well,
love that at the beginning of this, you were like, I don't know why people were scared of me. And then it's been like 4 times, and you're like, well,
like
actually.
I did.
suddenly, like I'm becoming more self-reflective
Uh,
on this stuff, and I'm like, oh no, I was the bad guy.
I did drive past that house at night and just stare at the door and then drive off.
no. That's not why. That's no. That doesn't count it for. Next question here for you is, how much time did the packaging take?
For which so there's a few different packaging contexts, and again, it depends very much on the type of computer that you're using. So when we do a package for this, which is basically we have a Horde server that you can run a cook command that will basically package all this up and get it ready. That took it took about an hour and a half by the end of it. But it does also, it depends on so many different things. The computer that I've got from Epic is very, very quick and very, it's ridiculously overspec. So most people don't have that machine. I can run like a package build for this in like 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, same.
But
If you,
but that's with the editor already having kind of like done a lot of that stuff before, because it, again, like if you're doing like regular packaging, it will speed up a lot because it's already kind of like pre-cooked a lot of that content. If you're building this for the very first time, it could take hours.
yeah,
Um,
even on a fast machine,
yeah,
like if I do a package from nothing with no cook data, it
yeah.
can take 3 hours.
A lot of that stuff needs to be kind of like, all the shaders need to be compiled for it, and all the variants that it needs, and all of the various kind of like permutations that it needs to generate for all of that stuff, all the processing it needs to do. It can take a long time, and again, like that, a lot of that cooked content is the actual that body of that 80 gig, right? So that 80 gig that you're downloading from the launcher, and like 25 gig of that is just all the pre-cooked content. That's not actually the actual content folder itself with all the assets. That's all of the stuff that it needs to make it run at least reasonably quickly. But yeah, it's not. It depends on the computer. It depends on how much cooking you've been doing beforehand and all of that good stuff.
The will of the gods, how fast your hard drive is,
Yeah.
all those things.
But again, a
The
lot of that
weather.
stuff is it's like a money, it's like a cost calculator, right? Like we buy quite expensive computers because we don't want to be sat there waiting for hours and hours and hours, because that's money spent, right? That I'm not able to work because I've got to wait for this thing to compile, or I've got to wait for this thing to cook. So a lot of those things are just kind of like a cost benefit. If you
Yeah.
can spend however many thousands of, I don't want to think how much my computer costs. But if you think about how much money you can technically save if you spend X amount on a computer, that's quicker, then you might as well do it.
The best thing people ask me often, what should I get for my machine to be a game developer? I'm like, the more RAM you have. Like seriously, the more RAM you have, the better things will be. Because when you're dealing with the amount of assets we're dealing with, just giving Unreal the room to breathe and not start slamming your virtual memory every time you load something in, you'll get better performance, you get better building, and so on. And RAM can be affordable sometimes.
That's a point actually as well. One of the other big things we did was once we started to get to a project this size, you can find that you run into a lot of issues with paging file. And basically that's just kind of like reserved space on your computer for volatile data, right? So it's not something you're going to keep, but it's like the computer going, I just need somewhere to put this for a little bit while I think. And and sometimes you don't have enough of that. So if on Project Titan, for example, like the landscape is all nanite. So if you go into like apologize for that noisy view, but like if you go into there, you can see that like the actual landscape itself is also nanite. But if you try and enable that on a landscape this big, it'll often say that your paging file isn't big enough. And basically what you need to do is you just need to go into your computer settings and increase that size. So it's relatively easy to do, but like again, you know, once you start working at scales of this size, you do need some good hardware to run it, right? Like I've already seen a few people in the comments on the overview video say, I've tried to run this on my laptop and it's like it's dying. Like the editor is not the game. Just because you've got a good spec gaming laptop does not mean it's enough for like this level of you know, kind of game development intensity. Like you are running the game and the editor and all of the stuff that entails, like around that. Like it's why you should never, you know, like you should never judge the game's frame rate based on when you play an editor, because there's so much background stuff going on that's going to affect that, and it's going to slow it down. That just by, you know, if you package this up and run it as a standalone game without the editor running in like a shipping build, the performance difference is massive. It's like 15 to 20 FPS more than what you get when you run it in editor. Like it's a big difference.
Definitely. Let's see here. Are there plans in the future to have individual assets available on Fab, kind of like how Megascans are separated, so we can add individual pieces into our projects via Fab without migrating all of the assets to a new project?
Probably not. We'll most likely we'll just keep this as a set project, and the assets are part of it, and you can kind of extract them if you want to. That's not to say that the artists that built this couldn't make their own asset pack. Be absolutely fine. Like the character artists who built the characters could go in and make a fab, you know, kind of asset that people could download separately from that. And they could even charge for it if they wanted to, because again, they built the asset, so it is also theirs. We basically, the way that we ran it is that when they agreed to do the art jam, they gave us license to use their content to release as this sample in this context. So we'll be keeping it in that context, or you know, kind of however we use. We might end up starting, you know, kind of using assets across other samples, just because it's really good. It's a really good amount of like content that we can use, like, you know, especially the characters. There's so many that are really varied. Like they're really nice to have as like little examples. So they may crop up in some of the other sample work that we have. At some point they might end up in content examples, but they're not going to be going outside of that for kind of foreseeable future. They'll only ever be used for example content. Like we're never going to sell them or anything. It's not what we want to do.
You may see them in some kind of Unreal Fest talk in the future.
Yeah.
Like, look at those trees.
Yeah.
There was a request that I figure maybe we could do at the same time while answering some other questions too. If you're up for it, you can tell me no. This is just wanted to throw that out. That is absolutely a possibility here. But someone was wondering if you wouldn't mind hopping into the project and showing off um, some of the different areas through several of the biomes.
Yeah, sure. Sam, do you want to load up volcanic, desert, and
Yeah,
some
I'll
of the
do.
Arctic? And because I've got a lot of the kind of middle region already loaded
Yeah,
in.
I'll do that. Why don't you start and I'll load those in
Yeah.
while you're doing it.
Okay, cool. So like the whole map, I'll just give you a quick kind of like bird's eye view so you can see it. Some of the bits are missing because we've just loaded in some of it and not others, so you will see a bit of a gap there. But we've basically got like a really nice broad range of content, with the middle of the content being kind of like this grasslands, marshlands region. So over here, if we have a little look around, we have our marshland area, which has this really cool kind of like mushroom village. And another area I really want to show as well, because this is actually the screenshot from like week 1, I think, if you remember, Tina. But like kind of all finished is, I think, Critter Village, I think this is called. So we've got these lovely kind of like finished tree stump houses and stuff like that.
Really good.
Little kind of like regional stuff there. Then we have the actual marshland area itself, which is really, really nicely done. If we go through, we should see some of the kind of witch swamp assets as well. Try not to move around too much. We have our cool kind of like frog-footed witch house as well, with some content in there as well. Like honestly, the amount of content in this project is ridiculous. Like it's 80 gig and it's justified. When you go through, one of my favorite areas, which is the kind of frog temple. This is really good actually. So sometimes, because we're using a lot of level instances, and those level instances are often nested inside others, sometimes you'll get areas where stuff is missing from that area when you're looking in editor. The best way to get that back that I've found is to just do a little browse to the level. So it's selected, and then just re-add it back in. You'll actually find that if you play this, all of the content is there. It's just not in the kind of the editor view. So if we drop this in, you can see that suddenly kind of like all of this stuff is in here. But yeah, this is definitely the Frog Temple's one of my favorite areas.
Yeah, I love it.
For this. We have the kind of like, we had some crazy stuff in here towards the end. We had like this, kind of bull kind of poking out the ground, and we had a big boot added, which like I didn't see for ages. And then suddenly I just was like wandering around, and I was like, huh, there's a big
boot.
shoe in the level. When did that get on? So that's in there. We've got Night Market, which is another area of marshlands. We've got Carnival, which kind of is starting to get into desert a little bit more. Again, like you go into these things. This is one of the really difficult things with this project, and you'll find this as you're flying around. It's so easy to lose the sense of scale of this space because you get so used to flying around it kind of like at this size. You forget that you go in and you go down, and there's like these little lovely like little assets in here. Like I love these little kind of like ride-on camels that they've got in there. So it's really important for you to kind of like making sure that you keep that sense of scale is really vital. What else have we got? We've got these villages over here. I think I'm reaching the edge of what I've got loaded in here. But these houses, which are beautiful. We've got the Hall of Light up ahead, which is this big kind of like domed, crazy effects room that someone worked on. We've got, where are those little underground little villages there? So we've got these little underground villagey things, which are really nice. Sam, are you loaded? Do you want to take over and show some of the other regions? Oh, you're
I
muted.
think you're muted.
I am building 18,000 PCG graphs.
Well, never mind then. I'll keep going.
Keep going, and then I'll give you a shout. I'm getting Arctic and Desert loaded in, and then go from there.
Right at 000, we have this giant snake titan, which is kind of like coiled around this lake, which is really cool. And this lovely kind of like interior church. Again, like you go inside a lot of these places, and they are I won't wait for the exposure to catch up, but they're all kind of like fully decorated and stuff, which is really cool. Let's pop over to this little region over here. Again, like there's so much content in this stuff. Like is for 3 people, it was a lot. It was a lot to kind of manage. Again,
I'm ready now. By the way, I can switch
back in.
Oh,
cool. Okay.
Let me
I'll just. Can we switch over to Sam's screen? We've got this awesome little flying area.
So, can you see me? Are we good to go?
There we go. Now we can.
Hey, it's resizing virtual texture pools. So this is the desert region, which was one of the first regions I worked on when we were doing the landscape layout. And desert's kind of challenging just because it is big and rocky and sandy, and you it does create a certain kind of landscape expectation. One of the things that I really liked is we'd put in this sort of basic river that runs through the desert, runs through, and there are lakes that are connected to it and so on. And people went in and really sort of built in stuff along the river in terms of not just trees and stuff, but there are these little villages and these little huts all the way along that kind of give it a sense of space until you end up this big cool temple at the end. But yeah, and as you can see, that has a whole interior, which if I fly into, I'm going to fly through. But yeah, that was the thing, is what I really liked with desert was people really had to work with the landscape and expand it out. So you get like these wonderful sort of little villages built out of stone where they've used geometry to build out the environment on top of the standard height map that we did to like give it a little more life. And then even things like this is possibly my favorite thing in the desert. No offense to other parts of the desert, but this is this Desert Wizard's Tower, which as you approach, there are stairs, there is a stream climbing up, and then you get to this sort of hanging gardens of Babylon, and it keeps going up and up and up, and it's all built for you as the player to use the glide and the grappling hook to, swan around doing cool exploratory stuff. Actually, one thing that's worth mentioning that we did was we had a couple areas that looked really cool, and so we decided to duplicate them across the map a little bit. So this is Jungle Temple, and we put one in the desert as well, just because it actually kind of fits in pretty nicely there. But areas that were a little barren, we decided let's find some of our nice level instances and sort of reproduce them there, and then just dress them into the landscape. But
One of the
then,
really critical things, actually, that I think a lot of people don't understand about level, and the clues in the name, but like level instance, like it's
reusable.
like it's reusable, but also too, like you shouldn't necessarily rely on it being like purely contextual to that space that you decide for it to go in. We had a lot of people who were kind of like building, and they put PCGs inside the level instance that were sampling the landscape that didn't exist outside of the main level. And that kind of practice is really risky, because if you imagine you take that and you're like, oh, actually, I'll place that over here as well. That level is still only one level, right? You're just making an instance of it, but that content is the same. So you're going to end up with it generating that PCG data for like two different regions and trying to do it for one thing. It doesn't work well.
You may notice this nomad camp is now reproduced around the map a couple times too. But yeah, like what I like is like we have this wonderful desert oasis that people built out, that great rock work, great sort of natural terrain work, and then they built up this really nice detailed nomad camp where you go to the level of detail where you're in the tent and there's a tea service, and at night the fires light up and all of that. It's really an amazing sort of level of detail and focus in the work for people in 10 weeks. So I'm going to shoot over to volcanic sulfur on the other side of the landscape.
Are there any other questions we can answer while we're...
While
Sure.
I'm chatting?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I didn't do that.
Questions here. Let's see. Is it easy to copy the PCG that you guys fixed up to their own projects as is from Titan?
Yes, you can migrate. You might pick up quite a lot of other assets as well at the same time. PCG was kind of a bit it was a bit transformative. So the original kind of like first iterations of PCG were very, very fixed. They were very much kind of like, you're building this logic graph for these specific sets of assets, and that's how you want it to handle it, and they're going to generate those set assets. But by the time the Jam launched, PCG had changed to become much more agnostic to assets. So basically, it became the PCG graph was the logic, and then you could kind of control what it would output and how you input data in as well. So those things became much more separated, which made it much more versatile. But so there's a very broad range of PCGs in the project, some of which are still in that old method where it's like I'm going to sample this region, I'm going to modify these points in some way, and then I'm going to output the end result as these static meshes. And then you have other PCGs that are very much kind of like waiting for data to come in and then processing it as a kind of like in a generic way and then outputting it in a dynamic way. So yeah, it kind of depends on the PCG you go for. But you can certainly, you've got access to all of the script and stuff that's in there. So you can copy the graphs, you can migrate them over to your project, you can, you can just copy and paste them over and fix up the links however you want. There's a bunch of different ways to do it.
There's just looking at the time, I have
10
two
minutes.
final questions that I'm going to pull for y'all because I think
Fly through,
both
let's
of
go.
them could
Yeah.
go pretty in depth here. So the first
Nice.
here is
I'm happy.
just overall, what is the part of either the project itself or the process you can choose that you're most proud of?
It's the main map, right? Like
Yeah.
it's going in and seeing like the culmination of all these people's efforts. Like in one space, like because that was the ultimate goal, right? Like it was to create this single cohesive world. And then when I fly around, I'm like, oh my god, like
There's so much.
there's so much stuff here. And I I've explored the project probably more than anyone else, I would say. To like obsessively kind of like flying throughout every region. And I've seen almost every single asset, I think, at this point. Because we had to go through like quite an intense legal review with all of this stuff to make sure it was okay for us to release it as a project, right? Because you can imagine if someone goes in and they build like the Disney castle or something and put it inside the project, then that's not
That
something
wouldn't
that we
go
want to
well.
release.
Yeah.
Is that that wouldn't be good. So we went through a really intense process with it. So I've seen so much of this stuff, but I'm still surprised by kind of areas of the map that I haven't like kind of drilled down to. Like the biggest surprise I got was is it Darktooth Hall in Desert? I don't know if you've
Oh,
got that loaded, Sam.
oh, I
Um,
don't. I can load it in though.
yeah. So this one is, I think I gave feedback on it at some point as well. So it's not like I didn't know it existed, but when I gave feedback on it, it was very, very, it's very, very block out, very simplistic. They were kind of asking some questions about lighting because we did in the project we did have a lot of people continually add multiple directional lights to the main world, which was very annoying. So like every now and then you pull the project and suddenly there'd be like 8 directional lights in the world,
It does break your
which you
day-night
don't
cycle a
want.
bit.
There's
um,
eight
Yeah.
suns.
yeah, there's 8 suns in the world. Yeah. So they were asking some questions about that, but then like the project ended and like we were looking through and I went over and I saw this little kind of like corner region, and like it's completely you you probably wouldn't even notice. I'm hesitant to tell you about it because it's such a nice little surprise for people who find it organically. So I guess spoilers if you don't want it to be spoiled for you.
Click away
Um,
now.
yeah, but there's
Aaron, do
this.
you remember the region number? That way
Yeah,
I can just load in.
I can probably, I think it's reasonably small, so I can probably load it.
Yeah, mine
It's like
is mid
the region
unloading.
O5, I think.
Okay.
Okay, I'll load it as well. We'll see who gets there first. It might be the one underneath it. It could be O6.
Let's see. We'll have a race. We'll see whose PC can get there first.
While we're doing that, should we, what was the last question?
The last question was, now that you've gone through the process of running something like Project Titan, and especially seeing what the follow-up work to something like that is like, do you see yourself doing a similar jam again in the future, or will this remain the kind of capsule of its time?
So there needs to be there needs to be like a need on our side for the sample, I think, for us to do it again. Like we're quite a small team with tech content. We build sample games and projects, and like we're very, very sporadic, right? We work on loads of different projects. We're often jumping onto special projects. We're often jumping onto kind of random initiatives and needs and stuff like that. So we're all over the place. But ultimately, there's a very small core team that actually works on maintaining and keeping the samples and updating them, and there's a big burden on doing that. So Titan's a really big one, but also we've got a lot we want to do with with Lyra. There's a lot we want to update with crop out. There's a lot we want to add to content examples. Content examples it got that kind of art refresh that I did when 5.0 first came out. But we want to keep adding maps to it because again, there's still no like nanite map and stuff like that I think we have got that coming, so that should be there soon. I think I overloaded my level, so I've crashed it.
Oh no!
Sam, I don't know how you got on. I loaded in too many cells.
How do we look now?
There we go. Yeah.
Let me just do full screen.
So what we look at this, to answer your question.
Well, this is through. You'll need to share through the.
Yeah, Sam, you're sharing on.
Am I sharing through the wrong thing? I am, aren't I? Wrong button.
Yeah.
There we
so
go.
many places.
So we probably aren't going to run something like this again for a while because if we did, we'd basically have to drop Titan. We'd have to kind of archive that and move on and do the next thing and it's been such a time investment and it's been so beneficial. It's worked so well. It would be a shame to just archive that so soon after it's been released. So we want to add a lot more content to it and expand on what it's demonstrating and showcasing, as I said before, with kind of like adding a quest system and kind of stuff like that, inventory, things like that. All of the, again, like the tropes that you'd find in an open world game. We don't need another open world game to demonstrate that stuff because all of that stuff is already done in Titan. So if we did anything like this again, it would be very different to what Titan is. It wouldn't be an open world project. It would be something completely different.
New, which is kind of exciting in and of itself, I think.
Well, yeah, we haven't got anything planned for next year. We've got a lot we want to do with the samples we already have, and the samples we have already cover such a wide variety of things. So, oh yeah, here we go. There's Darktooth.
Yeah, while you were talking, I was driving through Darktooth so people could see. It's basically a whole game level.
It's really cool.
It's really cool. It's a very well thought out space.
Very stylistic.
The way the plants guide you in, and then you go in through the door. The lighting is really nicely done.
I would say it's one of the best, if not the best, interior example we have in the project.
Yeah, it's really great.
Really well done.
And it's like when you explore it, you feel like you stop thinking, "Oh yeah, I'm in an example." You just think like you're playing a game. And at the end, you find a titanic tooth. A kingdom for a tooth.
For reasons.
It's sparkly, and that's really all that I need. So.
And that is just one tiny bit. Just let me do that of that, which is one tiny bit of that. It's so big. It's massive.
I think big thing to remember when you're loading in these cells, just remember you're loading in a kilometer at a time in each region. Like you are loading a square kilometer of stuff. Most levels don't stretch beyond, like don't get anywhere near close to that. Like you look at the Lyra, kind of like deathmatch arenas, right? Those things are tiny.
They're tiny. It's weird that we use streaming on them at all. But I worked on Lyra. It was interesting. I'm hoping to revisit it next year. But yeah, I'd say one of those things we do advise you is don't load in the whole world, like unless you have some machine that can also, run a nuclear power plant.
If you've got
load in one bit.
You can do it. So I think I've got like 64 gig of RAM on mine, which is pretty reasonable. You can do it if you load it in a certain order. I found like if you load in like the Arctic and some of the grasslands and then load in the desert and then kind of like load tropic last, because tropic is the densest. It's got this, it's filled with forests. It's ridiculously densely populated. So if you kind of do it that way, sometimes you can load in the whole world at once. It does not run well, but you can do it. And if you've got like 128 gig RAM and like equivalent spec machines for like content for that, then you can load it in, but the vast majority of people, you need to stick to either a cell at a time, or like, like 4 cells. It very much depends on your computer. And also remember your scalability settings. Don't just leave it on high and load it in. So Epic is basically designed to be 30 FPS kind of maximum based on all of the graphic settings that you've got in there. High is 60. And then kind of like you've got medium and low for kind of like just scaling down from there so that you can get that performance back. But that's kind of like the general benchmark. And again, like so yeah, you just need to account for that. You're loading in a lot of content and a lot of data, so just keep that in mind.
And be patient while it loads in. It will take a while.
Yeah.
It will build shaders. It will do all those things.
Enjoy a nice cup of coffee while you wait.
Go for a walk.
Go for a
What it's
walk.
like outside.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's all the questions that we'll tackle for today, since we're kind of at time there. But want to offer the floor to both of you one last time. Is there any final things that you want to say about Project Titan, or to everyone watching?
Thank you. Thank you is a big one. Thank you for all your work on making this thing happen, both people at Epic and all the challenges. It really does mean a huge amount to us. So thank you. That's what I got.
Yeah, I know exactly the same. It was really cool. It's a really good project. I'm so glad we've got it out, and it's in people's hands now, and they can download it. And please do download it, explore the world, pick it apart, learn from it, look through all of the educational videos that we've put in. There's more than 30 videos. There's hours and hours of live stream footage where we're critiquing work. Like there's so much content for you to look through. So, please do, kind of look through it and learn from it as best you can. And also go onto the ArtStation, kind of page where we're showcasing all of that work, and just give the people that did it on there like a like and kind of follow, and just tell them that they did a really good job, because they did an amazing job on this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm dropping so many links in chat right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of content. We realized kind of once we dropped it all, we were like, oh, this is a lot, because all of the live streams together is like 25 hours of content, and then the 36 videos that we've got, there's like another couple of hours in there at least, and then we've done 3 talks on it. Yeah, there's a lot. So
There's a lot.
The overview. We'll keep talking about it as long as they'll let us.
Yeah, it's what we're here. It's what we're here for. We want to educate people and kind of demystify this stuff as much as possible, make it easier for people as much as possible. We want to help you in your dev journey, wherever we can.
Absolutely. So there's so much. There is so much to dive into. Some of the stuff that was just posted in the chat there, we have the link to the project itself, so you can go download it and check it out for yourselves. We have a link to a bunch of mini tutorials that have been all gathered together there, as well as the art blast. But even then, there's other stuff, like we mentioned, so go forth, find it all, collect it, watch it all, become all powerful from Project Titan. But there's lots of stuff available. I'm really excited to see what folks do with this project, myself as well. So let us know whenever you do stuff, because I think we'd all like to see what creative things y'all end up making out of this project and doing with this project in the future as well. But yeah, that's it for today. First of all, big huge thank you to Aaron and Sam. Also, a big thank you goes out to Seb, wherever he is nebulously in the universe. Thank you so much for running Project Titan in the first place, for doing this entire huge thing. It was an incredible project to watch happen, being able to bring so many people together working on this huge, insane, amazing thing. So firstly, thank you for just doing this in the first place. It was awesome. And then, of course, thank you for being here today and taking the time to walk through the project, kind of talk through some of the process, reminisce a little bit. We'll all get a little nostalgic over the crazy 3 months of when it was happening. And then, of course, the insane amount of work that you all did afterwards in the process of getting it ready for its official launch. So big thank you for doing that, first of all. Round of applause from me. Come on, chat. Put some claps in the chat for Aaron and Sam. Take your bows. You did a really cool, crazy, kind of unprecedented thing. So thank you so much for doing this in the first place.
Yeah, honestly, I mainly did it just so I could justify getting these made.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Gosh, dragon heads. Gotta
No,
have them.
thank you.
Thank you very much. It really means a lot.
This was awesome. This was so, so cool. And of course, thank you everyone watching, not just for watching today, but also for those of you that participated in Project Titan. Thank you for being part of this. It wouldn't have been what it was without you and your work and your effort. So thank you for doing that. And also thank you everyone just for watching today's show. Even if you weren't part of Titan, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for seeing what it is. Hopefully, you'll download the project and get to enjoy its launched version now. And have fun with that. Like I said, I'm really interested to see what folks do with it now that it is out in the wild. But thank you for taking the time to be here today. If you popped into the stream in the middle of it or you missed some parts, no worries, because we post all of our videos, all of our streams. I messed it up. We post all of our streams in video format that can be viewed on demand on both our Twitch and YouTube channel at Unreal Engine. You can also keep up with us at Unreal Engine on all of our socials to keep up with the latest news, updates, all that kind of good stuff. And last but certainly not least, if you haven't already, you should come join us on the Epic developer community, which is dev.epicgames.com, which is where we host things like our forums, our documentation, a whole slew of tutorials that have been made by both our own Epic staff and awesome, wonderful members of the community, as well as pretty much anything you could ever need, really, in regards to the engine, to UEFN. We have Epic for Indies there. There's all kinds of stuff at the developer community. So go check that out if you haven't already. And then the final announcement for today. Next week, next Thursday, we are going to be doing our annual year in review stream, which is kind of our big holiday. We go all out for it. Everybody wears silly sweaters and hats and all kinds of good stuff. We'll be joined by Tim Sweeney for that one, as well as a couple of the other folks from Epic talking about some of the big, cool, crazy things that happened this year. So please come hang out for that. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're just going to look back at 2024 and all of the insane things that happened in it, because when you take a step back and look at it, there's a lot that happened. So we'll just kind of walk through everything and celebrate the wins and look forward to all the cool things that'll happen in 2025. So hopefully we'll see you all then. It'll be next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern. But that's that. One last thank you to Sam and Aaron for being here today. And thank you everyone for coming. And we'll see you all later. Bye, everyone.
Everybody.